don't stop. And it is we don't love. It in the be like highway.
Peter Goselin, thank you so much, comrade, for coming back on the show.
Thank you, comrade.
Oh, wait.
Thank you very much, comrade. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, man, I'm very glad that I was able to home you down. You just got out of court, which was a treat because you were showing Yale students how it's done. So
I hope so.
always good to show they learn from the best. For people that are new to this channel, Peter Goselin is a long-time socialist, long-time labor organizer, a long-time labor lawyer who has done a lot of work for not only people I have that I call my dear friends, but for workers all around Connecticut. If you could give us just a little taste of what you can share, so
Sure.
people understand what it's like being a labor lawyer.
Yeah, so I would put it into three categories. So one is that I represent a couple of union locals, Local 222 of the United Electrical Workers, which is municipal employees in different parts of Connecticut. And the other is a small group of city employees work for the city of Hartford. So labor law is one piece of it. Mm-hmm. The other part of my work, employment law, I kind of divide that into two pieces. So I represent a lot of folks who have claims that involve civil rights and civil liberties violations. It could be freedom of speech, it could be discrimination, it could be sexual harassment at work, family and medical leave, everything in the category of individual employment law. And the other group is really, I represent a lot of undocumented immigrants who have issues involving wage theft. And, you know, your viewers probably aren't familiar with this, but wage theft is like one of the biggest problems that people who are undocumented in the United States, up until recently, now we know ICE is the big problem, but the background problem has always been that employers will cheat them. They won't pay them their wages, or they'll promise to pay a wage rate, or they won't pay them overtime, or they'll pay them less than the minimum wage. And they do it on the belief that the workers won't do anything.
Right, because they're undocumented and they're not expected to investigate because they don't want to be deported and all those things.
The fact of the matter is that the law provides these employment rights to these workers.
Oh, really?
It does. It definitely protects them. And it's not difficult, really, to handle. I mean, these cases are just like any other kind of what we call wage and hour cases. Mm-hmm. You know, unpaid overtime, unpaid minimum wage, failure to pay wages, things like that. The only wrinkle is that, generally speaking, my clients are people who, you know, have been working under really horrible working conditions for really bad employers. So I do my best, the best that I can, to represent them and help get them a fair compensation for their work. What all of us would expect every day when we go to work, mm-hmm. be paid fairly, at least be paid what the employer has said they're going to pay us,
right,
and what the law requires.
Now, do you know anything about how the undocumented workers are paying taxes? Because I've read about it, but I still can't grasp. When people have asked me, I just say they do pay taxes. I send them information, but I'm not strong enough on the dialogue on how it goes down.
It has kind of an important background to it because at one point the last time, I forget the year now, the last time that there was a wide-scale, forgetting the word that I'm looking for. I'm sorry.
It's all right. It is early.
Yeah. Amnesty, that's right. Yeah. The last time that there was a wide-scale amnesty for people who were undocumented, among the things that they had to show in order to get green cards and eventually become citizens was that they had to show that they'd been living in the country for a certain period of time, mm-hmm. and that they had a lease where they lived, or they had a mortgage where they lived, and that they paid taxes. So starting at that point in time, there was a big emphasis in the immigrant communities. Immigrant advocates would say, look, you know, you really, even though you are working in jobs where the employer, if the employer knows you're undocumented, they're just paying you in cash under the table, but you should pay taxes anyway. So what they advise them to do is to get an ITIN number, as you know, which individual tax ID number, which is what small business people like me do. And if they have an ITIN number, that gives them the ability to identify their tax return and to declare the amount of wages that they made and to pay taxes on that wages. The difference is this. They have to declare the amount of money they made. They can't get a refund. They're not entitled to a refund, and the government doesn't process one for them. And because of that, the IRS collects millions of dollars every year from people who are undocumented, who are paying taxes, in the hope that one day they're going to be able to use paying taxes as evidence that they are capable of being good citizens and that they're going to follow the law, and that they've done what they were supposed to do while they were here. So that's one piece of it. The other piece is that there's an enormous number of workplaces now, especially, where employers are just looking the other way when they hire someone. So they will treat that person as an employee. I've known of cases where the employer told the employee, here's the Social Security number I want you to use when you fill out your paperwork. And then the employer issues payroll checks just like any other employee. But that Social Security number is in the system. So what that means is the employee has his money taken out. They can never get it back because they can't claim. It's not their Social Security number. They don't use it if they do file for taxes. So that's another significant source of income.
Wow.
Just the taxes and FICA and Social Security that are taken out of everybody's paychecks. Many people who are undocumented are having their paychecks deducted that week, every week, even though they can never claim recovery of that money or get any of the benefits. They can't file for Social Security. They can't get welfare. They can't do any of the things that would be based on their having been an employee.
So this is just literally don't want to use the term scam, but it seems like a legal scam, basically, that's just never spoken. Oh, you would use the term scam?
I would totally use the word scam. One of the things that I like to point out to people, I've given a lot of talks about this particular wage theft issue. And one of the things that I really like to talk to people about is two things, really. One is the one thing that all of us, all workers, know, the one thing that we count on is that you get up in the morning or maybe at night or whatever, you go to work, you work your shift, you go home. At the end of the week, you're going to get paid. And you're going to get paid according to the law, at least the minimum wage. You're going to get paid overtime if you work time and a half. And if there's a bonus program, you get bonuses or whatever. But you rely on the employer doing the right thing because that's what most employers do. They pay according to the law. When somebody's undocumented, they have to take whatever work they can get. And an awful lot of employers take advantage of that. And they know that these people are in a situation where they can't disclose their identity. They can't provide a green card or Social Security number. And so therefore they know that whatever they pay the person, that's what they're stuck with. And the thing that I have noticed, and like I said, this is one of the things I always talk to people about, is the number of well-respected citizens, upstanding business owners, members of the Chamber of Commerce, that sort of thing, who are regularly cheating people out of their wages because the people who work for them are undocumented. And incidentally, it's illegal for them to hire people who are undocumented. Right. And they know that, so they're already breaking the law. But on top of that, they're also breaking the wage laws. But they have no difficulty kind of representing themselves as pillars of the community because they're business people. So
I'm thinking of big names now because we're seeing that the scam works very well with small business owners. And so the money that is going towards taxation, that doesn't go anywhere near. They have no way of getting the business owner itself of getting it from the IRS, right? It goes all goes to the IRS.
Goes to the IRS.
So the IRS complains about money, and they know they're getting a kick up. They have to know by this point that they're getting a kick up from undocumented workers.
Yes.
There's really no excuse for them coming out with this, we're losing money and all this stuff. It's just a ruse to bully us into giving out more, basically.
Well, here's how much of a ruse it is. Because in addition to the fact that every year undocumented immigrants contribute millions and millions of dollars to the U.S. economy in terms of taxes, it's also the case that because they generally work for less than the market, they are contributing to the economy because they're producing goods or services or whatever for less than the regular market rate. So the employer is making a greater profit off of them. It's literally the case that there are a lot of employers who have what I would describe as a business plan. Their business plan is, I could pay X number of workers and pay them X amount in wages. Or I could hire X number of undocumented immigrants and I could pay them X minus one. They're gonna get a bigger profit by reducing their labor costs, by hiring people and then cheating. So that's enormous. It's absolutely enormous.
And this is why they would not crack down on major employers like the president, Donald Trump, with Mar-a-Lago. I don't know if Jeff Bezos does undocumented workers, but I won't be surprised.
I don't believe that. I will say this. I don't think that there is any corporation in the United States that either makes goods or provides services that hires relatively low-wage workers that doesn't hire undocumented immigrants.
So it's everyone, all around.
It's everyone. It's everyone. It's just about everywhere. And so much so
Walmart,
that even...
too.
Well, Walmart,
Definitely.
absolutely, yeah. So much so that there are several, there are actually now a number of unions that have significant undocumented immigrants in their membership, and that's one of the things that's helped to change the perspective. Traditionally, the union movement took the position that immigrants were taking away their jobs, and I know everybody's heard that before.
Right.
It's really not true anyway, but
Yes.
But as more and more immigrants were in the economy, for example, as more and more immigrants in the Los Angeles area were putting up drywall and doing carpentry work and things like that, Carpenters Union said, you know what? Realistically, this is part of our membership base. We have to protect them just like everybody else. And so they more and more have taken the position of fighting for the rights of undocumented immigrants in order to make sure that their members get treated fairly. Now, the other thing about that is that when they do that, because market rates reflect whatever the employer can hire somebody at, right? Whatever people will work for, whenever there are undocumented immigrants doing that kind of work, generally it tends to suppress the market rate.
Right.
When unions especially protect workers' rights regardless of whether they're immigrants or not, that tends to raise the market rate. So as workers, we're all much better off if immigrants are treated fairly, whether they're documented or undocumented. We benefit, and that's been proven. We benefit by undocumented immigrants working in the economy.
And so to stay on this, let's transition into unions. I am part of a conservative union, the Teamsters.
Sure.
They're definitely conservative. Clearly, I'm not conservative by far. But yes, I have to acknowledge that they're conservative, so they don't really act as much. But there are other unions like 1199, Unite Here, that are very active, but are not as active when it comes to ICE, National Guard. And we know that there's laws that are prohibiting, basically saying that you can't protest something that's not outside of your job description, because if you start unionizing and protesting something that has nothing to do with your union, your labor, you get in trouble. We know the loophole is that they don't have to endorse it. It could just be the workers themselves that go out and make a stance. That's why we're calling for a general strike, which is what Brendan Johnson, the Democratic mayor, is also calling for, and other parties like the PSL and the Green Party have called for.
And also the Chicago Teachers Union.
The Chicago's Teachers Union. That's one good union that's actually doing the fight. Why do you think it's not a present issue to all the other unions in America? Because I haven't heard really much from other unions.
Well, I think there's a couple of elements to it. There's a sort of a big picture element, which is very historical, that has to do with the fact that the labor movement after World War II was really caught up in the whole Cold War anti-communist hysteria. And beginning in the 1940s, they began to, there were unions in which there were communist leaders, and there were unions with large numbers of communist members. And they began to purge those unions. So, for example, the United Electrical Workers that I worked for was was actually thrown out of the AFL-CIO because of the fact that they refused to sign loyalty pledges saying that they were not communists. Nonetheless, the UE has survived all these years, but it's independent of the AFL-CIO.
Right.
It's also one of the most democratically run unions in the United States. The fact that they are who they are, they've always maintained this identity where they believe that they don't want to have a union bureaucracy leadership. They want the workers to feel that the leaders are their leaders, that they are the same as them, that they have a common interest. As a matter of fact, the officers in the United Electrical Workers, I believe, there's a rule that if you're an officer in the UE, you cannot earn more in salary than the most well-paid UE worker, which is something that, frankly, the Teamsters would never buy into. I should say, there are some Teamsters locals that are pretty decent.
Yes.
And I've worked.
That's why I only gave criticism to my Teamster.
Some of them are extremely conservative, and some of them are worse than conservative. Some of them are downright reactionary, but some of them are pretty decent. And I think, like everybody in the labor movement, the younger workers and the younger union officers and union leaders and union organizers are the ones who are more tuned into what's happening in the country right now, especially with respect to the situation with ICE, and also a lot of other issues having to do with the Trump agenda, like the SNAP benefits and things like that. The traditional, rhetoric in the labor movement, just like among a lot of people, was that immigrants steal our jobs, people on welfare aren't working, and we should take it away from them. It's because they're lazy, et cetera. And this new layer of labor leadership and labor rank and file is really changing that. So, for example, you cited the example of District 1199, the Healthcare Workers Union, and the Unite Here, which is the merger of the old Textile Workers Union and the Hotel Employees Union, Unite and Here. We just recently had a big demonstration in support of undocumented immigrants at the state capitol, at the Connecticut State Capitol. And you could see there was a sea there of purple shirts. And the purple shirts were SEIU 1199 members and other SEIU members. Justice
I take
for
back
Janitors.
what I said, 1199. I was not there. I apologize.
But you're right. The issue is, the legal issue is this, that unions can't go on strike. Or technically, they can't go on strike for something that's outside their wages and working conditions. Correct. You're right about that.
Yes.
When we've started talking about the issue of the general strike, it sort of created sort of an overall discussion about this. And so one of the things that some unions are starting to say is, well, you know what? You're right that that's what the rule says. That's what the law says, the Taft-Hartley Act, federal law.
Right.
But it is also true that if we have members who are in danger of being taken away, detained in an ICE raid on our workplace,
exactly,
that's a health and safety violation.
Yes.
Right? That's something that has to do with the health and safety of our members.
Right.
So therefore, if the reason that we are striking is because of the bad conditions that are being created by ICE coming into workplaces, we're going to at least make the argument. Whether we'll win that argument legally, I think the more important thing is that if we mobilize enough workers, when you mobilize enough workers, then you have the ability to actually influence what the law is. And right now, the conservative interpretation of the law would be, we don't have the right to strike because our members are being abused because they're undocumented. But we can change that. And part of the discussion about a general strike is that the idea that if there is a large enough turnout, trying to defeat the right-wing agenda that's taken hold in this country right now, then that means that we'll be in a position to prevent the bosses and the corporations from punishing these unions or trying to take them to court, because they'll realize what they're up against. If they kick a hornet's nest, they're going to get stung.
For instance, was it the Toyota plant that had this issue recently? It was it was a South Korean. Toyota's Japanese.
It's a battery plant.
It was a battery plant from South Korea. I can't even think of the name, but ICE went up in there, and they just like they're not even just like given the courtesy where they come in and they like get an investigation, ask questions. No, they're just putting boots to asses. Quite frankly,
Yeah,
they could beat up an American citizen all they know. They don't care, and it's just a violent purge is what they're looking to do, and that made a few of those South Korean workers because they were there to teach the American workers.
yep, that's right.
And they're like, I don't want to come back now.
Yeah,
They're not. So a lot of them are not coming back.
yeah.
And it's to the point. It's like, where is the common sense in this type of like, if you want to enforce some type of deportation, immigration type of policy, where's the common sense in thinking like, oh, we should still keep these people as humanely as possible, but no, we're just going to treat everyone like they're just a common filth.
Well, really, I think the first blow that was struck that really indicated trouble actually didn't technically involve somebody who was an undocumented worker, and that's actually why it was such a signal. It was following the in the wake of the Columbia University student strikes around Palestine back in March. They arrested a student organizer named Mahmoud Khalil, and
Syrian,
Mahmoud was a Palestinian living in the United States on a green card, and he and his wife, who's a U.S. citizen, were just about to have a baby, and the only thing, literally the only thing that the government had against Mahmoud Khalil was that he had openly said that this is all he had to say, is that he disagreed with the federal government's foreign policy with respect to Israel. That's it. That's all he had to say in order to make him a target. And in fact, when they went to detain, when ICE went to his graduate student apartment to detain him, his immediate response was, well, I have a green card. Ordinarily, I mean, in the past, a green card is, in fact, protected status. You have the right to be here. You have the right to work when you have a green card. And there are a number of other similar statuses that allow immigrants to be present in the United States and to work. And
how are they able to snatch people from court? I'm sorry. That's just insane because that's what they're supposed to be doing, to go to court.
There's a kind of craziness to that I think even, with all due respect, lay people, non-lawyers, may not be familiar with, because I hear the debates back and forth about whether ICE ought to be able to detain people in court. And here's the interesting piece that people are missing. In in 1760, a British legal writer and judge named Blackstone wrote this treatise on the law, very famous to lawyers. We all know about it. Most of us never read it, but we all know about it. It was sort of a major work in the development of British law, and British law is really the basis for most of American law.
Right.
So in this treatise, one of the things that he talks about is the idea that you really shouldn't. Courts can't have people serving warrants or arresting people in court because that interferes with the business of the court. And it prevents people from doing the things that they're supposed to do when they're supposed to show up in court, right? And so the British courts had issued a number of decisions around this. And then in the 19th century, around the end of the 19th century, the U.S. Supreme Court issued several decisions about this, saying you do not serve warrants inside a courthouse. And so when this issue came up, the fact of the matter is that serving warrants or arresting people in a courthouse was extremely unusual. And when ICE started doing it, right away there was this big discussion. Should they be allowed to do this? Should they not? And like I said, what was missing from the discussion is that has never been allowed in American courts. Since the late 1800s, courts have said you can't do this here. And the reason being that A, you disrupt the business of the court, and B, you keep people from showing up for court, which, I think a lot of people tend to think of going to court, the average person, like, oh, they go to court because they've been accused of a crime, right? Yep,
that seems to be the common negative perspective of the average person.
And there's that. But, in addition to the fact that somebody can go to court and be found not guilty of a crime, right? That's one piece of it. But other pieces of it, first of all, even in criminal trials, there are witnesses, and the witnesses may or may not be immigrants. They may or may not be documented. And in civil court, there are all kinds of reasons. People have problems with their credit card company. They buy a car, and there's a problem with the car. They are having problems with their landlord in housing court, or they're having problems with the corporation that owns their mortgage in civil court.
Right.
There are all sorts of family, divorce court cases, child custody cases. There are literally dozens and dozens of reasons for somebody to be in the courthouse. And the minute you say, if you come to this courthouse, you are facing the possibility of being arrested, you've provided an enormous reason for people not to go to court, even when it doesn't benefit them to go to. Perhaps what they're doing is going to benefit somebody else, like being a witness, for example. But people are going to say, no, you know what, I'm not, and they have been saying, no, I'm not going to go to court because it's too dangerous for me to do that. Now, the state judges in Connecticut, the state Supreme Court justice, just recently announced a new set of rules that reflect that, and that say that only under rare circumstances would a warrant ever be served or an arrest made in court. And it's actually in reaction to these terrible ICE raids that the court made the decision to do this, because clearly it was disrupting the business of the court. So they said you can't wear, if you're ICE, you can't wear a mask in court. If you have a warrant, you have to give it to a marshal, and that marshal has to have it okayed by a judge. It has to be a genuine judicial warrant and not an administrative warrant. And, for folks who probably have heard this come up somewhere along the line, this is important. ICE relies almost entirely, ICE and the Border and Customs Patrol, these two agencies rely almost entirely, when they go out to detain people, on what they call administrative warrants. Basically, an administrative warrant is a warrant that was created by ICE or created by the Border Patrol saying, you know what, we think that you're in the country illegally and we're going to detain you. It has no legal authority in court whatsoever. And it also has no authority when an ICE agent or Border Patrol agent tries to serve it on somebody. So, for example, if police came to your door and they said, we have a warrant for your arrest or we have a warrant to search your house, if you resisted, they could break down the door and they could use whatever levels of force they needed to do in order to carry out their warrant. If an ICE agent comes to your door and they say, I have a warrant, and they slip it under the door and you look at it and you see, well, this is an administrative warrant. It's not signed by a judge, signed by some guy that works for ICE. And it doesn't meet any of the criteria of a real judicial warrant.
Right.
That person has a perfectly legal right to say, no, you can't come into my house. I'm not letting you in. I'm not answering your questions. Go away.
Interesting.
And that's supposed to be the end of the story.
And they're supposed to walk off. And where they're supposed to find basically a warrant from the court.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, once they're
the
denied.
reason they don't, right? And it used to be that sort of thing did happen.
Okay.
Back in during the Obama administration, when there were a lot of enormous number of detentions being taken, the reason they were able to do it was that they relied on judicial warrants directed at specific individuals. ICE right now we're told, has a daily quota of 3,000 immigrants a day.
That's ridiculous.
That they are supposed to detain.
That's ridiculous.
And there's no possible way they could meet those quotas if they followed the law. So they use these administrative warrants as a way of intimidating people into cooperating, even when they're not legally required to do it.
And it's off of the ignorance is bliss that a lot of people don't know their rights. So they basically get a opportunity to tackle them because they don't know their rights.
Right. And it's also that kind of ignorance that means that there are a lot of people who think, well, I don't understand. Why is this a problem? It's they're government agents and they have a warrant. Why shouldn't they be able to detain somebody? Right. Why shouldn't they be able to bust down their door or do whatever they have to do? Right. So, people just really, there are a lot of people who, in fact, look, there are even a lot of people who may be sympathetic to the situation of people who are undocumented who don't know this because it's a legal issue. If you're not an immigrant, you've never had to deal with this before.
That's how you do it.
Yeah. So why would you know this? So it's one of the things we have to educate people about. That's really important. I mean, when we're talking about educating people about ICE and Border Patrol, these are the things that are these kind of, I guess you could call them legal technicalities. Most people, whether they're immigrants or not, don't know them. And it's really important. It's really at the heart of this whole discussion about what ICE is doing.
Right. And if we could go into the Border Patrol part as well, too, because I think it's very essential, especially being that it's been mostly Democrat states,
Yes.
Democratic cities with the commonality, black mayors.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a white mayor here right now, so I joke with people saying, "Well, you're good for now until
That's right.
Trump gets mad at the white Democrat mayors." But is this first of all, because this based off of your knowledge, is this the first time a president has ever done this? And also, does this go against the Constitution that the National Guard took an oath to, not to Trump, but to the Constitution? And why do you think these National Guardsmen are taking their orders? So basically,
yeah, it's a really good question. The laws that the President Trump relies on in saying that he's sending the National Guard are laws that apply to insurrections, the so-called Insurrection Act, and also one of the other major statutes that he's used that have to do with invasions.
okay,
So the theory that his legal people have operated on when they go into court is, well, the president says that that Venezuela is invading the United States because it has drug cartels, which is a whole other line of BS, right? I mean, you're appropriately shaking your head. But literally, they're standing in front of federal court judges and saying, well, Your Honor, the president says that there's an invasion going on. Well, Your Honor, the president says that in these cities, the crime rate constitutes an insurrection and civil disturbance at a level that allows him to dispatch the National Guard. Now, consistently, federal district court judges have seen through this and said, no, that's they're not allowed to say it's BS. I will say it's BS, but it's a complete fabrication, and it's a fabrication in order to obtain a political end, which is to look really tough deporting people. I tell you the truth, I'm not sure that Trump or anybody else really cares about how many undocumented immigrants they expel. To the extent that they've got their supporters believing that, like, everybody who's undocumented is going to be expelled. Well, that's nonsense. If the United States were able to remove all undocumented immigrants from the United States today, the economy would collapse.
Oh,
there are big parts of the country.
Yeah.
The entire, like, Southern California, Southern California would come to a standstill, right? And many other parts of the country as well. Major industries, the building industry. The number of people I've represented who worked as builders, landscapers, bricklayers, dishwashers and cooks in restaurants, domestic workers, janitors. And this is not an exhaustive list by any means. But all of these people, all these occupations, there are large numbers of people who are undocumented. And of course, the thing about this too that we have to keep in mind is that Trump isn't just using ICE and using the National Guard to back them up, not just using them to go after people that are undocumented. I mentioned Mahmoud Khalil, who was not undocumented. He had a green card.
Right.
Green card holders traditionally, they by law were protected. And all they have to do is say, yeah, but you violated the terms of your green card. Of course, that requires that you go to court. You end up going to court in an immigration court. The first thing you notice that in Mahmoud Khalil's case, the first thing they did, they arrested him in New York at Columbia University. First thing they did was ship him down to a detention center in Louisiana.
Right.
Why Louisiana? Because the immigration judges in Louisiana are really awful and will take positions that are very consistent with what Trump is saying.
Right.
If he'd been in front of an immigration judge in New York City, they would have thrown that case out in a minute. But as it is, the federal district court judge that his lawyers went to immediately saw through this and said, no, this is not lawful. So you've got your green card holders. I'm sorry. You also have an enormous number of people, especially in particular Haitians and Venezuelans, I think Salvadorans too, if I remember correctly, but definitely Haitians and Venezuelans
Okay,
who are in the United States under something called temporary protected status. Now, in the case of Haiti, back in the around 2010, I guess, there was an enormous earthquake in Haiti, and it displaced an enormous number of people. And the government said, you know what, we're going to give Haitians temporary protected status in the United States, which means they're allowed to be here, they're legally allowed to be here, and they're legally allowed to work. And the same thing with the Venezuelans. They were treated under temporary protected status, allowed to be here, allowed to work. People seeking asylum who are going through the process, allowed to be here, allowed to work. People
Which
who
is
have
literally in our
other kinds of-
Constitution.
protected by law, and protected by the Constitution, by the Due Process Clause.
Right.
That you have to be able to demonstrate that they did something wrong in order to remove them.
Right.
And so what Trump did in effect was to say, all of these people, whether they're illegal or not, are now targets for ICE and for the Border Patrol. And incidentally, you talked about the Border Patrol. I want to be sure to point this out because this is something that came up recently, and it was kind of so terrifying when I heard it. I think people, I think that's the only appropriate response is to be terrified and horrified at the brutality of it. First of all, Trump was interviewed just last night on 60 Minutes, and he was asked, what do you think about the actions of your ICE and Border Patrol agents? They showed him a video of ICE agents busting the windshield glass of a car and dragging a woman out of it while her kids were in the car. Something that just about anybody in the United States who has any heart would say, that's horrifying.
Right.
Trump's response to it was, well, actually, I don't think we've gone far enough. I think the ICE agents and Border Patrol are going to have to go further. Now,
I need to make sure I get that clip and put it on the show.
His theory that we have to go further isn't just a theory. It's not like a lot of the things he spouts about.
Right.
In the last couple of weeks, the Department of Homeland Security, both ICE and the Bureau of, or the Border and Customs Patrol, have been. There's been a purge going on, and a lot of the higher-ranking people in ICE are being removed. The reason they're being removed is that, unlike ICE, Border Patrol agents have much more of a history of large-scale, no holds barred, as violent as they want to get, treatment of people who are undocumented.
Jesus.
So the high-ranking people in the Border Patrol will now be the ones who are in charge of ICE operations.
Wow. So they not only are violent, but they are making steps to be even more violent.
Even more violent. Yeah.
To the biggest possibility that they can imagine in their sick minds.
This Border Patrol chief, what's his name? Bavino. He is in Chicago presently, and is the person in charge of what they call the Midway Blitz operation, which is the Border Patrol engaging in an all-out war against people of color.
And you can say it's strictly a race issue. It's about people of color.
Issue.
It's not about the white Europeans.
When you helicopter people in to a high-rise apartment building, and they go through the building just randomly, breaking down doors, zip tying people, zip tying children, using tear gas, using flash grenades,
crazy.
Locking people up, holding people who are U.S. citizens, and of course, there are, in any major urban neighborhood, of course, you're going to find people who are not African American but are from Africa or from the Caribbean or from somewhere else. So in many cases, these people are legally present in the United States. ICE is taking them, or Border Patrol is taking them anyway. So that particularly horrific example, which I think a lot of people were exposed to, is an example of, and they interviewed Bovino on CBS. They said, well, you've seen that this is what your agents are doing. Are you concerned that any of them may have used excessive force? And he said, absolutely not. I'm completely confident that everything we've done is appropriate.
So I can't use the term Nazi when this just sounds very Nazi to me. Like I can't.
You can use it if you like, but here's the only reason. Here's the only reason why a lot of times I don't use the word Nazi.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I think that a lot of Americans are in this mindset where they think, oh, you know what? This is just like what they did in Germany in the 1930s. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that they're wrong,
right?
But it's also an awful lot like what the United States has been doing to black people for like a couple hundred years, right?
Separating families.
Yep, separating families.
Building prisons.
Yep. Having segregation laws,
Jim
putting
Crow
people
for
in prison
100 years.
for trying to vote or exercise their civil rights, civil liberties. This isn't a new thing. I have heard some people refer to ICE and Border Patrol as the new KKK, and I actually think that's a better description. Because it doesn't create that impression of like, oh yeah, this is like something long ago and far away.
Right.
This is something that's part of our history. It's being done because you can recruit people to do things like that in this country, because there are people in this country who are part of that racist heritage and, who buy into it. I mean, Trump, look, Trump is doing this for a number of different reasons. And it doesn't, frankly, I don't care what Trump thinks of black people or brown people or anybody else. What he thinks about them as people is completely irrelevant to the discussion. He's unleashed this force for two reasons. One of them is to please his political base, which it clearly does. And the other is to create an environment in which everyone is afraid to do anything that might draw the attention of the authorities.
Now, why do you... we're running out of time, so again, we're going to have Peter Goselin back on, and I'm very, very happy that New Haven Free Library was able to accommodate us here in the tutor room. But why do you think? Because that's one thing that's in the back of my mind. Because knowing Trump throughout the years, because being a hip hop fan, he has always been a part of the hip hop culture. Not even like wanting to be, is just that. Him being a New Yorker, being a real estate owner, and he's a flashy guy, that attracts a lot of rappers. So, of course, rappers are going to write songs about him and mention him and stuff and put him in movies. He never really, to me, until he started running, became this type of, like, polarizing figure. But why do you think he's so... Because you learn about in the 90s, he was ready to get some innocent kids murdered over a rape that never happened.
Kids, yeah.
Right. And so why do you think he's such a law and order? Like it's, I call it Karenism, but it's like the highest level of just, he thinks he's a Texas Ranger or some shit, like from back in the day.
Well, I think that, I have friends, especially lawyers, who get upset when I use the word boss to describe an employer, because obviously it has, for a lot of people, has negative connotations.
Right.
But here's the thing of it. Donald Trump has spent his entire life, from the time he was a kid, being a boss. And his view of being a boss is, I have absolute authority over everybody that works for me. And he's shown that time and again. He's sexually assaulted people who's worked for him. He's done all kinds of horrible things. He's failed to pay people their wages. He's fired people. He's called them nasty names on social media. He has been relentless in the way that he has treated people who displeased him. And when he went into public life, all of a sudden that audience of people who he considers to be the people he has complete authority over expanded from being the people who work at Mar-a-Lago or the people who work at Trump Towers to being everybody in the United States. And it's clear that his goal, and that's one of the reasons why the right wing has backed him the way they have, his goal is to have complete authority over everyone in the United States. Now, lurking in the background, and this is why it's important that it's not just a matter of getting rid of Trump, lurking in the background are the people who wrote this Project 2025 initiative with the Heritage Foundation.
Russell Vaughn in particular, a very close counselor of the president. Right.
And there are so many areas where you look at what Trump is doing and you say, well, I believe that he might want to do this, but frankly, I don't think he's smart enough to pull it off. And they'd be right. He isn't smart enough to pull it off. He doesn't know. He doesn't know his proverbial ass from his elbow when it comes to running a country.
He's too busy with yes men, and that's what makes him feel smart.
Yeah, exactly. He surrounds himself with people who call him the most brilliant person ever, and he's the greatest president ever, et cetera. But lurking in the background are the Project 2025 people like Vought. And their goal for years has been to have a president in office who would appoint right-wing Supreme Court justices, would purge the judiciary, and would erase everything that's happened in the United States, every positive social development since the beginning of the 20th century. So everything having to do with labor rights, everything having to do with civil rights, everything having to do with civil liberties, everything having to do with consumer rights or environmental protection, everything having to do with the rights of people in, to decide, make their own decisions about how to raise their kids or how to educate them. They want to obliterate all of that. And what they want is to bring the country back to what Trump has sometimes referred to as the golden age, which is the 1890s. During that period of time, there was Jim Crow through much of the country. Very few black people had the right to vote anywhere in the United States. Women didn't have the right to vote at that time. Labor unions were illegal during that period. People had virtually no. You can still find many books, law books, that lawyers rely on a regular basis that characterize the relationship between employer and employee as a master-servant relationship. It's another one of those things that we inherited from England. And so at the turn of the 20th century...
That is so Anglo-Saxon-y.
It totally is. At the turn of the 20th century, when somebody went into court and complained about how they were being treated by their boss, that was considered a servant's complaint about their master, and that's the way the law described it. That's the world that Project 2025 and Vought, that's the world that they want. And the reason they want that is because it's become clear to them, and I think they're correct about this, it's become clear to them over the last approximately 100 years that big corporations cannot consistently make a profit, and they cannot consistently expand their profits without getting rid of all of these measures that have been taking place over the last century. That if you have unions, automatically that means unions are going to be preventing the kind of horrific workforce conditions that existed before unions came in. If you can attack organizations that protect people of color in the United States, then that means that you have the ability to segregate workers, pit them against each other, hire people under less favorable conditions, treat them worse, house them in poorer conditions, not have to, if you're a landlord, you don't have to make repairs, you can just throw somebody out if they complain.
Right.
You can have unhealthy conditions. All of this is their agenda. They want an America that looked the way it did in the 1890s when large numbers of immigrants were coming into the United States, and people were living working in sweatshops.
Towns.
Yeah, working in sweatshops, living in shanty towns, working in tenements, and under horrific conditions. And that's the world that they want. Trump goes along with that because it's part of his dream of being the most powerful person in the world.
Amazing.
And having everybody answer to him. And as long as those two are, I can tell you, I don't think that Vought would hesitate for a moment kicking Trump to the curb if he thought he was not useful to him anymore. And I'm sure that he has the ability to do that because these guys know the inside story about what Trump really does.
Right. So he's a useful idiot.
Exactly. He's not the first useful idiot. I mean, a lot of people think, and I think, I grew up and became political in the Reagan era. And during that time,
he was a useful idiot too.
He totally was. Yeah. People used to refer to President Reagan as the Teflon president because nothing stuck to him. But all that really meant was that he didn't care because he wasn't the one who was making the decisions. He had people from companies like the Bechtel Corporation in the background telling him what to do about everything. Trump was a two-bit, second-rate actor who became the governor of California and then got elected president as an ultra-right-winger. And the idea was, you know what, we've got somebody here who's going to be completely pliable to corporate interests, and he's going to do what we tell him to do. And he did quite consistently. And it didn't have to do with whether he was a good person or a bad person. He was just a useful idiot who was perfectly willing to go along with them. And the same thing with Trump, except that Trump is like Reagan, times 10.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's very, 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 very well revealing on how you broke this down. I don't think how any more clear you can be on this subject. It's exactly the playbook. And this is why we are socialists.
Absolutely.
Because we don't want this to happen. And majority of the working class, damn straight, if they knew this, they would not be down for this at all. They will become socialists as well, too.
Oh, yeah. I have actually a friend of my wife's who said recently, he said, I've read some of the things that Peter's written about socialism, and I've been thinking about it a lot, and I realized that I agreed with him about just about everything. Does that make me a socialist too?
Yes. Welcome to the fold.
Yeah, that's how people become socialists, because they look at it and they say, well, gee, you want everybody to have the opportunity for a good job that pays good wages. You want everybody to have safe and secure and healthy housing. You want them to have food to eat that's safe for them to eat and good for them.
Right.
You want them to have access to medical care and education. Well, those all sound like really good things. Why wouldn't everybody want that? And what the period we're living in now proves that capitalism cannot give that. Capitalism ultimately reaches a point where it says, no, you know what, we got to take all that shit back, because we are not going to let you have these things because they get in the way of our ever-expanding desire for profit.
Right, which is why, for closing, the big beautiful bill is the worst bill ever, because it literally gave the most transition of wealth ripped away from the working class and put right into the pockets of corporation oligarchs. And while this government is shut down, he is choosing where he wants to put money at regardless.
Sure.
And people were starving. And he's focused on Nigeria, Venezuela. We haven't gotten to that. We don't have time. But it's showing the playbook. It's making the rich richer, and it's making the poor poorer.
Yeah. The whole issue about the SNAP benefits, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is in charge of funding SNAP, has a contingency fund that could easily pay for SNAP benefits during
government
the shutdown.
They've
done it. They've done it before.
Right.
Trump instructed them not to do it, and he has said this, that the reason he didn't do it is that his goal is to take away rights, to take away benefits like the SNAP program, and make sure that they never come back. And if he's allowed to do that, that's what he will do.
And the fact that he thinks that's a big climb and achievement in his legacy to starve 46 million people is just astounding to me.
It is astounding. It is astounding.
Because that number is going to get higher and higher. It's not just going to start with 46 million. It's going to get higher and higher and higher over time, where we'll be back with what you explained, the shanty towns, and
absolutely,
it's just the beginning.
Yeah. When you consider that right now the situation with the SNAP benefits, people say, oh, well, these are people who aren't working because they're lazy, whatever.
They love using that.
So, a lot of people are working. They're what we often refer to as the working poor. They work one job, they work two jobs. They're still not making enough to make ends meet.
Amazon members are majority on SNAP at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. You know who else often gets SNAP benefits and rely on them because they don't make enough money? U.S. servicemen.
Who would have thought?
Yeah, servicemen and women, people in the Army and the Navy, rank and file soldiers. Very often, they often live on housing that belongs to the military.
Right.
And if it weren't for the commissaries on base that sell groceries at a lower rate, they wouldn't be able to afford to eat. And many of them are getting SNAP benefits, even in spite of all of that.
Wow. What a time we're living in, comrade. But I got to say, it is an honor to struggle with you and to struggle with the rest of the working class in this, because it gives me hope. And I don't have any plans on leaving, because I feel that we are ripe for a revolution. And it is my duty to be a part of that revolution, just like everyone else is.
Do we have time for me to tell you one more story?
Yeah.
All right. One of my favorite stories, and I think it really goes to what you were just saying. Mm-hmm. Years ago, I knew an older gentleman. When I say older, he was like the age I am now. I was a kid. I was like in my 20s. I was living in San Francisco, and I met this guy named Vic. And Vic had been a Communist Party member ever since his family got thrown out, evicted from a tenement in Chicago when he was a kid. Communist Party came there. They moved all the furniture back in. They put up guards, and they said, "We're not going to let them evict you." It's that simple. He'd been a communist his entire life. And when I knew him, he one of the things that he told me was, he said, over the last 10 or 20 years, now this is back in the 1980s, he said back since the 60s, he said, I've been to Cuba a number of times. I have a lot of friends there. He said, then it's a really beautiful country, and it's, plenty of times friends of mine have said, Vic, why don't you come here and retire? You're getting older, your retirement age, just come and take it easy. I mean, you've done this. You've been fighting all your life, just retire in Cuba. And he said, look, it sounds really attractive, like I would really like to do it, but I have a responsibility.
Right.
My responsibility is to the working class of my country. My responsibility is to make a revolution here.
Right.
I haven't earned this revolution yet. And I think, to me, that's like one of the most moving things anybody's ever told me.
That is so deep, bro. And it's so true.
It absolutely is true.
Peter Goselin, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.